My name is Audrey, and I was 4 years old when my life changed forever. That was when my sister Emily was born, and suddenly, I became invisible in my own home. Before she arrived, I was the center of my parents' world. Tom and Linda looked at me with such love, as if I were the brightest treasure of their lives. But everything changed when Emily entered our home. My earliest memories after her birth are filled with the sounds of her singing. By the time she was 3, she had already become the star of every family gathering, shining like a tiny comet in her frilly pink dress. She could sing a nursery rhyme, and everyone around her would freeze, hanging on every note. Even our neighbor, Mr. Green, usually as reserved as a stone statue, would say in awe, "That girl has a real gift." Meanwhile, I stood on the sidelines, holding plates of snacks I had helped Mom prepare. Emily had this angelic voice that seemed to awaken something warm and hopeful in people. My parents quickly began to see in her a future that seemed destined to brighten their lives as well. "Help your sister practice her scales," Mom would say, not looking up from her phone as she recorded yet another video of Emily's performance. I was 8 then, just beginning to understand what unfairness meant. Emily was 4, twirling around the living room in her tutu, becoming the center of the family universe. My life gradually became filled with responsibilities far beyond my years. I learned to use the washing machine because Mom was too busy arranging Emily's singing lessons. "Why can't I go to Sarah's birthday party?" I asked one morning when I was 12. Mom rolled her eyes and waved me off. "Emily has a performance at the community center today, and we need your help with her costume changes." "But I promised Sarah." I tried to argue. "Don't be selfish, Audrey," Dad cut in. "Your sister needs you. She has real talent, unlike—" He trailed off, but I knew what he meant, unlike me. That day etched itself into my memory. Emily was 11, and I was 15 when everything changed. She and her friends went to the mall unsupervised, something I couldn't even dream of doing at her age. They spent hours at the ice cream parlor, ordering dessert after dessert, competing to see who could eat the most. But the next morning, Emily woke up with a sore throat that quickly escalated into a serious condition. The doctor said her vocal cords were damaged, and she might never sing the way she used to. I remember when my parents came back from the hospital. I was sitting at the kitchen table, trying to focus on my homework. But as soon as I saw Mom, her face burning with anger, I knew a storm was coming. "Is this your fault?" she shouted. "You're her older sister. You were supposed to look after her." I tried to explain that I was following her instructions, doing laundry and cleaning the bathroom. "No excuses." Dad cut in, slamming his hand on the table. "You're grounded for a month. No phone, no TV, nothing. Maybe this will teach you to take responsibility." That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling and made myself a promise. One day, I would build a life where I wouldn't have to live in anyone's shadow. I just had to endure a few more years in this house, where I was nothing more than a servant and a scapegoat. The next 3 years passed in a haze of chores, scolding, and quiet resentment. Every time Emily got into trouble, skipping classes or borrowing Mom's credit card, it somehow became my fault. I felt a simmering bitterness deep inside but couldn't allow myself to express it openly. All I could do was wait. Wait for my chance. The acceptance letter from the state college lay on the kitchen table between us, its white envelope stark against the warm, homely smell of meatloaf. I had deliberately chosen dinner time for this conversation. They couldn't just walk away or ignore me. "It's the most affordable option," I began, trying to speak firmly, even though I was trembling inside. "The tuition is reasonable, and we don't have extra money." Dad didn't even look up from his plate as he muttered, "Audrey, we can't afford this." His face showed no regret or doubt, just indifference. Emily, sitting across from me, smirked, as she always did when I tried to assert my needs. Maybe you should have developed some real talents instead of just doing chores all day, she said with her usual snark. I took a deep breath, fighting not to lose my composure. You could take out a loan for me, I said, ignoring Emily completely. I'll sign a promissory note and pay back every penny once I finish school and get a job. Please, this is really important to me. Mom let out a long, dramatic sigh, her signature move to show her annoyance. Sweetheart, we're not taking out any loans. College isn't for everyone. Why don't you look for a job at the mall? Or maybe at that new cafe downtown? I felt the ground shift beneath me. But I have a scholarship. It'll cover part of the tuition. I just need help with the rest. I've researched everything and made a budget. Dad's fork clattered against his plate. We said no loans. That's the end of it. Some people are meant for college and others aren't. Accept it and move on. His words echoed in my head. I lowered my gaze to my untouched dinner, trying to hide my tears. Through the blur, I saw Emily's smirk. She, as always, enjoyed watching me fail. That evening, I called Rachel, my best friend from high school. We bonded over our shared love of math and our mutual status as outsiders. I was branded by my family situation, and she carried the stigma of being the daughter of immigrants whose parents owned the Golden Dragon restaurant downtown. They won't help, I sobbed into the phone. They won't even consider it. I did everything right, tried to be perfect, and they're not even trying. Rachel was silent for a few moments before saying, "Come by tomorrow. My parents want to talk to you." The following evening, I sat in the cozy office of the restaurant with Rachel and her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Kim. They had known me for years. I'd spent countless evenings at their place doing homework, escaping the chaos of my own home. "We've watched you grow up, Audrey," Mrs. Kim said with a gentle smile. "You're like a second daughter to us." Mr. Kim nodded and added, "Rachel told us everything. We'll pay for your tuition." I started to protest, but he raised his hands to stop me. "You'll work for us part-time after classes. We'll offer you good pay and a flexible schedule. You can pay it back gradually, interest-free. This isn't a loan, it's an investment in your future." I barely held back tears of gratitude. A few weeks later, I moved into my dorm room at college. My parents hardly noticed as I packed my things. They were too busy planning Emily's big piano recital. It was their last attempt to discover a new talent for her, one that could replace her lost voice. In college, my life transformed. During the day, I threw myself into my studies, and in the evenings, I worked at the Golden Dragon. Mr. and Mrs. Kim taught me everything, from waiting tables to managing inventory. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had a purpose and people who believed in me. For the first time, I wasn't living in Emily's shadow. In my sophomore year, I was studying in the library when my phone lit up with a call from my mom. I froze for a moment, feeling my heartbeat quicken. We hadn't spoken in months, and her call felt strange and unfamiliar. Finally, I picked up. "Hi, sweetheart," she said distractedly. In the background, I could hear the familiar sounds. Emily was probably rehearsing something again. "I just wanted to check in on you." "I'm in college," I replied, expecting questions about money or how I was managing without their support. But instead, Mom said indifferently, "Oh, that's nice." Her voice brightened as she added, "Emily's getting straight A's in her advanced classes. We're so proud of her. She's really found her calling." I said nothing. No questions about how I was paying for school or how I was coping. They didn't care. The conversation ended as abruptly as it began. Over the years, I only came home for major holidays, and each visit was the same. Relatives gathered around the dinner table, listening to stories about Emily's accomplishments, while I stayed in the kitchen helping with the food. As always, I remained in the background, unseen and unheard. But Thanksgiving in my final year of college was different. I was setting out the sweet potato casserole when Aunt Susan, smiling, asked Mom about Emily's college plans. Mom beamed and announced, "We've been saving for years. Our little star's education fund is fully set. We have enough for her to go anywhere she wants." My hands froze. The hot ceramic dish burned my fingers through the oven mitts, but the pain was nothing compared to what I felt inside. 2 years ago, they told me there was no money for college. But now I realized, the money had been there all along, just not for me. That night, lying in my old room, I called Rachel. "They had the money," I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady as tears streamed down my face. "They just didn't think I was worth spending it on." Rachel, as always, was calm and resolute. "Then prove them wrong." "You already are," she said firmly. Her words became my anchor. I poured myself into my studies and my work. By the time I graduated, I had paid back every cent to Mr. and Mrs. Kim and had learned every aspect of running a successful business. I worked my way up from waitress to assistant manager, all while maintaining a 3.9 GPA. On my last day at the Golden Dragon, Mr. Kim called me into his office. "I have a friend at Morgan & Chase," he said, handing me a business card. "They're looking for someone smart and hardworking, someone like you." I told him about how you revamped our inventory system and improved efficiency by 30%. He's very interested. A week after graduation, I walked into my new office at Morgan & Chase. The nameplate on my desk read, "Audrey Mitchell, Junior Analyst." I wore a suit I had bought with my own money. 6 months later, I was leading my own team, and by the end of my first year, I had earned 2 promotions. My projects were gaining attention at the highest levels. But Christmas came again, and something inside told me this year would be different. As I pulled up to my parents' house, I noticed it was dark. Only the living room window glowed with warm yellow light. There were no cars outside, and the house felt strangely empty. The usual elaborate Christmas decorations on the facade were nowhere to be seen. The darkened windows only deepened the sense that the house was no longer part of the celebration. The door was opened by my mom, and the first thing I noticed was her old, faded sweater instead of her usual festive attire. She looked tired, her hair carelessly pinned back, and her face devoid of the feigned energy that always accompanied family gatherings. "Is Emily not coming?" I asked as I stepped inside, taking in the silence that felt unusual and strange. "She's celebrating with her friends," Mom replied, fidgeting with her hands. I noticed how she avoided meeting my eyes. Their families rented a cabin in the mountains. Something exclusive, I think, with locally sourced dairy products. I nodded but felt a pang of disappointment. The living room was lit by just one table lamp. The lavish spreads that always graced our holiday celebrations were nowhere to be seen. Instead, I saw store-bought ham and a few side dishes still in plastic containers. There was no Christmas music, no excited chatter of relatives. Dad sat in his chair, looking older than I remembered. "We've had setbacks," Mom finally said, her voice barely audible. She glanced at Dad, and he gave a slight nod, as if granting her permission to continue. "The investments your father made didn't pan out. We had to take out loans to cover the losses. A big Christmas just wasn't in the budget this year." I looked at them, these people who once seemed so strong and unshakable. The ones who controlled every aspect of my life now looked tired, broken. Despite everything from the past, something in their worn faces tightened in my chest. "Give me a minute," I said, pulling out my phone. Scrolling through restaurant apps, I found one still open on Christmas. 20 minutes and a few $100s later, a real holiday feast appeared on the table. Ribs and truffle glaze, mashed potatoes, roasted vegetables, 3 kinds of pies, The aroma of the dishes filled the house with a warmth that had been missing for far too long. During dinner, I noticed Mom sneaking glances at me. Her eyes lingered on my designer watch and the silk blouse that likely cost more than their monthly utility bills. "We were thinking," she began cautiously, exchanging a glance with Dad. "Maybe you could help us out for a little while, just until we get back on our feet." I stared at them for a long moment. Part of me, the part that remembered the pain, wanted to remind them of their words when I'd asked for help with college. Some people are made for college and others are not. But as I looked at their faces, at the weight they were carrying, I just couldn't bring myself to say it. "I can set up an additional card on my account," I heard myself say. "With a monthly limit." Mom's eyes lit up. "Oh, sweetheart, that would be $1,000, I said firmly. "No more." They nodded eagerly, understanding that even this was more than they had expected. A few days later, I set up the card and handed it to Mom. They promised to be careful, to use it only for the essentials. And to their credit, for the first few months, that's exactly how it went. The charges were reasonable: groceries, utilities, small expenses. Sometimes I'd look over the statements and see store names that reminded me of the past, like the supermarket where I'd worked one summer in high school, trying to save for college. The irony always brought a faint smile to my face. 2 years passed. I foolishly thought things had truly improved. The monthly allowance created a strange, almost ritualistic rhythm in our relationship. Mom called me regularly to discuss expenses, and gradually, our conversations began to drift into more personal topics. For the first time in a long time, I felt like we were truly talking, not just exchanging mechanical pleasantries. Even Emily and I started talking again, though her competitive streak hadn't gone anywhere. Whenever I mentioned my achievements at work, her eyes would narrow slightly, and her smile would become strained. "Senior project manager? That's cute," she'd say in the same tone she used to dismiss my accomplishments in school. "I'm actually up for a promotion at Wilson & Company. It's a small firm, but incredibly elite. They only hire people who can handle extreme pressure." Mom and Dad, meanwhile, seemed engrossed in talking about Emily's new boyfriend, James. "He's from such a good family," Mom gushed during one of our monthly calls. "His parents own a real estate company downtown. Very successful people." While Mom listed his virtues, I tried to tune out those conversations. The monthly card charges remained reasonable: groceries, utilities, the occasional dinner out, everything that could be considered ordinary, necessary expenses. I even began to feel a small sense of satisfaction from helping my parents. It felt like this financial support was a bridge to rebuilding our fractured relationship. And then I saw that post on Instagram. On the screen was a perfectly white beach, turquoise water, Emily in a spaghetti-strapped dress holding James's hand. The caption read, "Paradise with my love. Engaged. Hawaii has blessed us." I stared at the photo for a long time, trying to process its meaning. My parents stood next to them, beaming with happiness. Mrs. Anderson, James's mother, looked flawless in a designer sundress, while Mr. Anderson proudly rested a hand on his son's shoulder. As I scrolled further, the second post made the blood in my veins run cold. The caption read, "So grateful to Mom and Dad for making this magical engagement trip possible for everyone. They insisted on gifting both families a dream vacation. Best parents ever." My fingers trembled as I opened my banking app. The card charges, which I had barely checked before, now appeared before me like accusations. Expenses from the last 3 months exceeded all possible limits. $12,400 for 6 first-class tickets to Honolulu. $18,860 for Ocean View Suites at the Grand WEA Resort. $2,800 for a welcome dinner at Moroto. $1,200 for couple spa treatments. $1,600 for a sunset sailing yacht trip. $3,500 for a private beach dinner. They had spent my money to fund a lavish vacation, and I wasn't even invited. They threw an extravagant celebration for Emily's engagement, including her future in-laws, while I was left out completely. My hands shook so badly that I dialed my mom's number 3 times before I managed to keep the phone steady. 1 ring. 2. 3. Hello? My mom's voice was calm, even slightly relaxed. In the background, I could hear Hawaiian music, the sound of waves, and the clinking of glasses. Emily's bright laughter floated through, hitting me like a slap. Where are you? My voice was steady and cold, almost professional, the kind I used in client meetings when a situation was spiraling out of control. Mom hesitated. The music in the background grew fainter, as if she had stepped aside. Oh, sweetheart, her voice was now barely audible, as though she feared I might explode. Your father and I just decided to take a little break, Mom said, her tone turning defensive. You know how hard things have been lately. We needed a small getaway. I stared silently at my phone screen, where the numbers in the banking app glowed like accusations. My free hand clenched into a fist. Grand WA Resort. Emily, James, their families. This break had cost me over $40,000. Mom, I said, my voice cold as ice. That's my money, $40,000. How could you? There was silence on the other end. Then I heard muffled voices, as though Mom had covered the microphone with her hand. I caught fragments. She knows. I should. Maybe you. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay composed. Mom, why did you use my card to pay for everyone's trip? And why wasn't I even invited to my sister's engagement? The whispering stopped. Then a new voice came through. A voice I knew all too well. Listen, Miss Overachiever, Emily sneered, her words hitting me like thorns. You weren't needed here. You're not just a walking ATM anymore. You ruin everything with your success story. No one wants to hear about your precious career while we're celebrating my engagement. I felt her words pierce me to the core, but I forced myself to hold it together. Well, the ATM just paid $40,000 for your party. Your little dream celebration, I said, my voice firm even as I felt like I was cracking inside. Emily let out a short, cold laugh. Well, that's what you're good for, isn't it? You work your fancy job, and we enjoy your money. That's all you're really good for. At least now you're serving a purpose. Not that it's any different from when we were kids. She hung up, leaving me in a silence that roared in my ears. I tried calling back, but Mom didn't answer, and her phone went to voicemail. Dad didn't pick up. Emily rejected my call after the first ring. Minutes later, the notifications started coming in. First, my parents' social media profiles disappeared. Then Emily's account. You have been blocked by this user. And then came the message from Mom. We're tired of your attitude and jealousy. Just leave us alone. You've already ruined enough special moments for Emily. I stared at the screen, feeling something cold and hard crystallize inside my chest. My body no longer trembled. I took a slow, deep breath and reopened the banking app. But this time, I switched to the booking section. Each tap of my finger felt like breaking another link in the chain that had held me in their shadow for so many years. Cancel 3 Ocean View Suites. Tap. Cancel the couple's spa packages. Tap. Cancel the sunset yacht cruise. Tap. Cancel the private beach dinner. Tap. Cancel 6 first-class round-trip tickets to Honolulu. Tap. Finally, I went to the card management section. One motion, and Mom's card was permanently deactivated. Tap. I placed my phone on the table and leaned back in my chair, closing my eyes. I pictured the hotel staff telling them their rooms were no longer paid for. I imagined them trying to charge something to the account and being denied. I could see their faces when they realized their return flights were no longer valid. 3 hours later, my phone exploded. The screen lit up with a flood of calls and notifications. Mom, Dad, Emily, and numbers with Hawaiian area codes flashed across my screen like a stream of panic headlines. I could imagine their luxurious vacation turning into a nightmare. The Anderson family was probably wondering why their first-class retreat had suddenly ground to a halt. The messages started pouring in one after another. First, they unblocked me on every platform, and then the avalanche of pleas began. Mom, Audrey, please call us immediately. This is an emergency. Dad, fix this right now. Young lady, you're bringing shame to the entire family. Emily, you'd better reinstate everything, or I swear to God. Unknown number, this is James. My parents are furious. You need to fix these bookings. The tone of the messages shifted as the hours passed. The initial commands and demands gave way to softer appeals. Mom, sweetheart, please, can we talk about this? Dad, we'll pay you back, just help us get out of this mess. Emily, come on, Audrey, it's my engagement. Don't be like this. James, my parents are threatening legal action. This is getting out of hand. I left their messages unread, letting each one hang in the void of silence. Then, methodically, I blocked every number and account. But not before I took screenshots. I had a feeling I might need them later. Around midnight, I got a notification. Emily Mitchell posted a new status. I can't believe my own sister would try to ruin the happiest moment of my life. She's always been jealous of my happiness, but this is a new low, canceling our family's entire vacation out of spite. Who does that to their own sister's engagement celebration? Some people just can't stand to see others happy. Toxic family. I'm heartbroken. The comments started pouring in instantly. Oh my God, that's awful. What kind of sister does that? I always knew there was something wrong with her. She's just jealous you're getting married first. Your poor parents must be so embarrassed. I stared at the screen for a long time, feeling the anger rise within me. I'd stayed silent for too long. My fingers flew across the keyboard as I typed my response. Let me tell you what really happened. My parents were using my credit card to cover basic expenses, limited to $1,000 per month. I trusted them. Yesterday, I discovered they had spent over $40,000 of my money on a luxury Hawaiian vacation organized for my sister's engagement. They didn't ask for my permission. They didn't inform me in advance. They didn't even invite me. When I called to ask why, Emily told me I wasn't part of the family. I was just a walking ATM. The last message my mother sent me before blocking me was, "We're tired of you. Just leave us alone." So yes, I canceled the bookings I never agreed to pay for. I annulled the return flights no one consulted me about. I stopped financing a vacation where I wasn't welcome. Here are the screenshots of all the messages. Here are the credit card statements. Here is the truth about your precious Emily and her ruined engagement. Judge for yourselves who the real toxic one is. I attached screenshots of the conversations, the credit card statements, and the transaction history. Everything they had done, laid out plainly for everyone to see. The situation shifted instantly. The judgmental comments began to take a different tone. Oh my God, Emily, how could you use your sister's money while excluding her from your life? This is cruel. Audrey, you're absolutely right. They treated you horribly. Emily, your toxicity is astounding. You're so strong, Audrey. Keep going. Watching the tide of outrage turn toward my parents and sister brought me a strange sense of relief. I would no longer let them control my life. The fallout unfolded with unrelenting clarity, like a train wreck in slow motion. Through mutual acquaintances and social media, I began piecing together the chaos I'd unleashed in Hawaii. My parents had to borrow money from 3 different friends to afford economy tickets home. They were forced to check out of the Grand WEA resort earlier than the rest of the guests, their faces burning with shame. Emily, predictably, couldn't keep her composure and had a meltdown in the hotel lobby, screaming at the staff. Someone caught it all on video, and the clip quickly went viral on TikTok under the caption, "When you think you deserve the world, but someone else is footing the bill." The breaking point came when the Anderson family realized they'd have to cover their own expenses. "We trusted you," Mrs. Anderson screamed at my mother by the pool. "You said you'd take care of everything. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is?" Emily, being true to herself, only made things worse. "Oh, stop being so cheap, you beggars," she shouted. "If you can't afford a few nights in Hawaii, maybe your son isn't good enough for our family." James stood beside her, his face pale, his jaw clenched. For the first time, it seemed, he found his voice. "You're right about one thing, Emily," he said quietly. "Someone here isn't good enough for this family." Without another word, he slipped the ring off her finger and walked away with his parents. The engagement was over. Emily's dreams of a wedding crumbled to ashes before they even began. All because they couldn't resist stealing from me one last time. A week after they returned home, I heard a knock at my door. "Audrey, sweetheart, please open the door." Mom's voice trembled, as if chilled by the cold, seeping through the sturdy wood of my apartment door. "We need to talk. We know we messed up." Dad's voice joined in, "Just give us a chance to explain." I sat on my couch, unmoving, barely breathing. The TV was off, but the blue glow of the screen flickered faintly across my face. The knocking continued, their voices growing more pleading, then desperate. 20 minutes later, they finally gave up. But that wasn't the end. Later, I heard them trying to convince the building manager to let them in, claiming it was an emergency. He called to ask me what to do, and I told him not to let them in again. That was the end of it. That evening, Rachel came over. She brought takeout from Golden Dragon, and we settled on my balcony, gazing at the lights of the city. She told me how my post had been shared in support groups for people dealing with toxic families. "A lot of people are calling you their hero," she said, picking at her noodles. "You're inspiring them to stand up to toxic family members and set boundaries." I thought about all the years I'd spent trying to earn their love. All the time I'd wasted proving I was worthy, deserving of their recognition. I thought about the money I'd given them, hoping it would finally make them see me as part of the family, not just a resource to exploit. "You know what's funny?" I said, watching a plane disappear into the night sky. "For the first time in my life, I don't care what they think of me. I don't care if they apologize. I don't care if they change." Rachel looked at me intently but didn't say anything. I continued, "I'm just tired. Sometimes the hardest part of growing up isn't learning to stand your ground. It's learning to walk away." I looked at the city lights, feeling the weight I'd carried my whole life start to lift. "I've spent my entire life in Emily's shadow," I said, turning to Rachel. "Now it's time to step into the light."